Good morning. This is Julie Kretschmar. We are doing the CFAM project. My project partner Sarah Fiddler will be presenting the other few slides after me, but this is part one. So a brief introduction. This is the P family. It consists of two elderly parents who are in their early 70s. They do have two sons who are grown and live in New York and California. Mr. and Mrs. P live in rural East Tennessee, specifically Greenville, Tennessee right now, and they moved from Argentina about 7 years ago. Mr. P is a retired businessman who has had a stroke about 4 years ago, and due to a recent decline in health has been placed in hospice care. And Miss P is the one that the clinicians are the most familiar with and who spent most of her time with giving information and the interviews with. And so we're going to go over Purnell's 12 major findings that we found in our interview. This is the overview and heritage. Mr. and Mrs. P were both born in Argentina. They also met there and were married there. Mr. P was born in the capital, Buenos Aires, and Miss P was also born right outside the capital. They lived in Buenos Aires for most of their existence in Argentina, and Mr. P's family actually immigrated to Argentina from Italy right before he was born. So while he is Argentinian, he is also of Italian descent. Miss P says that her family has been in Argentina for as long as she can remember, and she has a mixture of native and European descent. She isn't entirely sure. Miss P said that they were middle class according to Argentinian standards. Major findings about communications. Miss P speaks Spanish as her first language and can communicate pretty well in English. Mr. P speaks Italian, Spanish, and a very small amount of English. So Miss P is mostly the translator and who has the greater grasp on English in order to communicate. Miss P is very expressive. She speaks with her hands, generally in relatively close proximity to her conversation partner. She is not reserved with those she knows, and greetings are a kiss on each cheek. Miss P is very prompt to her job, and she was very prompt to our meeting, but she doesn't always respond very quickly to any sort of electronic messaging like phones or text messages. She's not necessarily very prompt about that. Major findings on roles and organizations. Mr. P is or was the head of the household and made all the important decisions up until he could no longer function as such. As I stated previously, he had a stroke about 4 years ago, and within the last month has had increasing physical and mental weakness up to the point where he no longer functions as the head of the family. In Mr. and Mrs. P's relationship, as well as in their culture, honor is incredibly important, and it is vital to maintain respect for the husband, as well as mostly the men in their culture. Miss P herself was a homemaker and stayed home taking care of her two sons and the home. She did cleaning and all cooking and that sort of thing. Another major finding in family roles is Miss P took care of Mr. P's parents when they were in Argentina. And Mr. P has very high expectations of Mrs. P to come and visit him and bring home-cooked meals every day in the nursing home. Obviously, since he's been on hospice, things have changed even a little bit more, but Mr. P will even call Miss P repeatedly and constantly, even if she's at another job, asking her to come and be with him, to cook for him, to take care of him. So he doesn't really like relying on the hospital staff, at the nursing home staff. He really prefers Miss P to come, and he's very demanding about her being there with him. Their two sons, who are their kind of extended family, so to speak, although they are still part of the nuclear family, they live in New York and Southern California, so they're not very involved in Mr. and Mrs. P's everyday life. Mr. and Mrs. P do have grandchildren as well, and Miss P states that they maybe see each other once or twice a year, maybe, but they do talk to each other about once a week on the telephone. Some major findings with workforce issues are that Miss P is a homemaker. She did not attend college due to her family unable to support her going to college. She got married to Mr. P pretty young. Mr. P was a businessman, and he is now debilitated in a nursing home on hospice. Miss P is now the breadwinner and works part-time jobs in order to make a little extra income. They do have some leftover insurance from when he was a businessman that takes care of his needs, but she mostly works as part-time, kind of to take care of her own needs. She works as a caregiver slash cooking slash cleaning lady for one of the clinicians' family members who has Parkinson's, and so she assists kind of part-time doing that. She also says she's worked at a vegan restaurant for several years in the area. Miss P also did and does do extensive volunteer work in her local church, and she cares for her husband, as stated previously, by taking meals to him and spending quite a few hours with him. As far as biocultural ecology, Miss P is slight with salt and pepper hair, standing just over 5 feet tall. She has light brown skin and states that maybe one of her grandmothers was of native descent from Argentina, but she doesn't really know very well what her history is. She also states she also wears glasses, and her personal conviction is that she wears long skirts in almost all situations. Mr. P is just over 5'7" with light brown skin, salt and pepper hair, and is of Italian descent. His family immigrated from Italy, like I said, right before he was born in Argentina. Miss P really doesn't know Mr. P's family health history. She thinks that his parents died of old age, and Miss P's father did have heart disease, but she doesn't know of any other significant familial history. High-risk health behaviors. Miss P does not drink or smoke or use illicit drugs and has been in a monogamous relationship since she was married at a young age. And as far as safety goes, she does wear her seatbelt here in America. She says it has been an adjustment since that was not the norm for her in Argentina, but she says she does try to practice safe behaviors. Mr. P also has never drunk or smoked or used any sort of illicit drugs, and to my knowledge has been in a monogamous relationship as well.